Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am refilming this video for the second time. The first time I filmed it, a major 20-minute clip was completely corrupted. So we're gonna try this again. I have my hair back because my air's messed up upstairs. It's such a nightmare. I have a client coming this afternoon and I'm just praying it fixes itself. The fan is on full speed, so that's why I put my hair back. Once every 3 months, my peeling travels up to my eyebrows, and that's what's happened today. So they look patchy. It's just a hot mess, but we're going to do this anyways because I really want to get it up. It's one of the most requested videos that I think I've ever had, and it's my favorite makeup brushes. So I am going to be talking about my favorites that I use on myself personally. I will talk about one brush that is my favorite in my kit towards the end because I just think I would be remiss not to mention it. But other than that, I'm not going to really talk about what I carry in my kit. I'm just going to talk about what I use on myself every day, what I reach for the most. Now, what I'm looking at my vanity right now, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 various sized cups and brush holders, pretty much full of brushes. I am a brush fanatic. I think tools are of the utmost importance. Can I do a full face with fingers only? Sure. Do I want to? No, I don't. I want my tools to make sure that I'm going to have the best finished look possible. And brushes are just so important. They come in so many various types and sizes and shapes, and I just adore brushes. But that being said, even though I have that many brushes that I use just personally, I do find myself really just pulling for the same ones every day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through every step of my makeup routine on my face. I'm going to tell you what I use the most, and I'm going to give you at least one alternative. Sometimes I'm not going to give you an alternative because honestly I don't have one, but I will on some give you at least one, if not a couple alternatives, because sometimes I do change it up. The brushes are all dirty because they have been used, so we're going to forgive that, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. So the very first thing that I do for my face is my eyebrows, because if I don't wear makeup, I still do my brows. I've said that over and over and over again. I have hypothyroidism. My brows do not grow, and they stop pretty much in the middle of my eye. So I technically don't have brows. Literally don't have brows, much at all. So I really only feel my best and most confident with brows. Not so much with makeup, but with brows. So I always use this Anastasia brow pencil. It is so old and it has lasted me so long. Although this is my second one I bought, the writing has rubbed off. But I believe it is the number 12 brush. It's just the basic eyebrow brush. Love it. Love the spoolie. It has lasted me so long. Like I said, it's thin enough. It's stiff enough to really get the job done, because I don't only use a pencil, I also fill it in with powder, and that's where this brush comes in. I don't have an alternative for this brush because it's the only one that I use. I'm going to try to go through this as quickly as possible. The next step is eyes. I almost always do my eyes before my base, and I always use some kind of either primer or concealer or something, because I do have a good deal of discoloration on my eyelids, and so I like to cancel that out so that the shadows that I use look like the actual colors they're supposed to be. So for that placement, I like to use the Delium Tools 788. I believe this is technically a concealer brush. You can see it's on a slant. I'm sure it works great for concealer, but I don't use a brush for concealer. I just use this for the eye primer, and I love it. Now, to set that eye primer in place, I use this brush, and I also use this to set my concealer, so I'll just go ahead and talk about that as well. I do believe you cannot get this anymore, but I know that they've done that before and come back with it on sale, so just always keep an eye out. But something similar to this is the Sephora Pro Crease number 10 brush. It's a very fluffy, crease looking eye brush. I like to use an extremely fluffy, non-dense brush to set my under eyes, especially because the more dense it is, the more it's going to actually pick up the concealer or lay down too much product. I don't want either one of that to happen, so I do prefer something much fluffier to set my under eyes and my primer. Now, for crease brushes or transition colors or deepening up the crease, I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, overall, my absolute favorite eyeshadow brushes are the Goss brushes. I adore those brushes. I use them on a daily basis, and I always recommend someone who's looking for something for eyes to really just go ahead and get the Eye Essentials set. That's what I did, and I do find that I use them all the time. Now, I do understand that there are people out there who do not feel comfortable using natural hair brushes, so I am going to give you some alternatives. So for the crease brushes from the Wayne Goss set, the number 16 and 17 are the ones that I use the most. So you can see the 16 I used today, so it's a little dirty. It is a little bit bigger, so it's going to place a color in a bigger space on your eye. I tend to use this for transition colors or lighter colors. If I want to go back in and deepen, I will use the 17 or even the 19, which is just a little bit smaller. So these are the main crease brushes that I use. However, I did use another one today that I'll show you, and it is synthetic bristles. It is the Morphe E27. So you can see it's also a little bit of a bigger brush, so I do lay this down. I use this to kind of blend out my crease color at the very end with almost like a yellow color, and I really do like this brush. It's a great alternative to natural hair. And then I don't know what kind of hair this is. I want to say it's synthetic. It's the Sedona lace. I think E63. It's rubbed off, but it is just their basic crease brush. This used to be my absolute favorite before I got the Morphe or the Wayne Goss, so I thought I would mention that as well. So for outer V work, or if you want to deepen up the outer corner of your eye, again, Wayne Goss is where I go to, and it's the number 18 brush. It's very similar to the MAC 217 that is now changed. I haven't tried the new synthetic version, but I can't imagine I would love it as much as the original. I also do love the original MAC 217, but this is kind of the same flat paddle type blending brush. Morphe makes one that's good. You know, Delium Tools is amazing. I have that in my kit. I think it's number 786, if I'm thinking correctly, but basically it's just this. Y'all all know what kind of brush this is. I really do like the Delium Tools though. The handle's really long, and it's just the perfect density. Now, if I'm wanting to lay down color on my lids, this is pretty much the only all over color brush that I will use for myself, and it is the Sedona Lace 941. I talk about this and use it in almost every single one of my tutorials. This is a little bit of a bigger brush. If you can see, I'm only praying that it's focusing. So it works well for me because I have a little bit more real estate on my eyes. If you have hooded eyes, or you just have even mono lids, or just an eye that doesn't have as much lid space, I also like the Sigma Medium Sweeper E54. So you can see that that is much smaller, but it serves the same purpose and packs on lid color beautifully. I do actually reach for the Sigma more when I'm using matte colors. For some reason, I just feel like it works a little bit better with mattes than shimmers, whereas I find that the Sedona Lace works better with shimmers than mattes. So that's why I pull for those the most. And then finally, a couple of detail brushes. The only lower lash line brush. Who's at my house? Oh, they're leaving. The only lower lash line brush that I use is Wayne Goss number 20. Again, if you've watched any of my tutorials, you know that this is where it's at for me. I adore this brush. Nothing I've ever used compares to the way this blends out lower lash line. Now, I understand not everybody wants a super smoky lower lash line like I almost always do. In that case, I would go with something I'm about to talk about, which this is what I use for my inner corner and brow bone highlight. It's the Sephora Pro Shader number 18. So if you can see, this is much smaller. It's just like a mini tiny detail paddle brush, and it is really great for those inner corners and brow bones, but it also is great for the lower lash line if you don't want such a smoked out eyeshadow application that's going to come down a little farther than you're comfortable with. This is another great option for that as well. Okay, so that's all that I'm going to talk about on the eyelids, or the eyelids, the eyes. I don't wear eyeliner. I mean, I'm talking like, it might be once every 4 months that I actually put an eyeliner on, so I don't have a favorite eyeliner brush for myself. In my kit, it is, I believe it's the MAC 263. I think it's their, I'll try to insert a picture. It's their, it's not the fine liner brush. It's a angled liner brush. Love that for my kit. Okay, so let's talk about face. So the first thing I lay down with a brush is my foundation. I have two foundation brushes that I go back and forth to pretty much all the time. I mean, occasionally I'll pick out something else, but these are really my go-tos. The first one is the one that I use probably 65 to 70% of the time, and it is the IT Cosmetics Heavenly Luxe Complexion Perfection number 7 brush. I know I'm not the only one to talk about this. This is a dual-ended brush. I rarely ever use this side. Occasionally I will use it in my kit because I do have a couple of these in my kit for taking off excess concealer after I buff that out, but really I don't, or concealer on the face, like spot concealing, but for myself I really don't use it. It's this that is so heavenly and luxe, as the name implies. Nothing, 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 nothing. Not my Marc Jacobs brush, not the other IT Cosmetics brush that I like for foundation. Nothing blends out foundation like this. This is the only brush that I've found that will, 90% of foundations that it's used on will not create streaks, smudges, or anything I need to go back in with a beauty blender to buff out. It is a beauty blender within a brush, basically. I believe it's like $48. You can almost always find it with another product on QVC for a much lower price. But even if it was $48, it's worth it. It is worth more than that to me. I adore this brush. Now, the other brush that I also really love, this one I prefer to use, I mean, it works great with liquids, but if I'm using a cream foundation, like the Tom Ford stick or the All Natural stick or the Bobbi Brown stick or Gerda Spillman if I'm not using a sponge, any kind of cream foundation that I don't want to use a sponge with because I do find you get higher coverage with a brush. This is the Bobbi Brown Full Coverage Face Brush. It's glorious. It's really glorious. And the reason I like it, it's so densely packed that if you compare it to this, if I were to take this over, it doesn't really stay over that much. If I want to take this over, see how it stays at that angle? Which is perfect for stippling products in. I find that when I stipple it on my face, it keeps that angle so nice that it just blends it out and stipples it perfectly, which is why I love it so much for cream foundation. So another alternative. I could talk about foundation brushes all day long. I need to shut up. Okay, I don't use a brush for my concealer. I use my beauty blender or any kind of sponge. Does not matter. I just prefer to use a sponge for my under eyes and my concealer versus a brush. So we're going to skip that and we're going to go to powder. Powder is the one I have the most variables on because I just have so many that I love, and I'm going to go through them really quickly. But there are 4 powder brushes that I reach for the most. The first one is the Mer Powder Brush. I use this one today with my Armani Neo Nude powder. Absolutely love this brush. It picks up just the very perfect amount. It's also one of those ones that kind of keeps its shape. Perfect amount of product and just lays it down. It's so big that I can go tap, 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 and like that side of my face is done. Love, love this brush. Yes, it's expensive. I have heard that there are alternatives or close dupes in the Sephora Pro range. So you might check that out. I can't speak for that because I haven't tried it, but I do know that I love this brush. The next option, and the second biggest, it's actually a little bit bigger than Mer, I think, is the Osmosis. I can't ever say that right on the first time. Osmosis Color Full Face Brush. So it looks like this. It's very large. It's the largest powder brush that I own. And again, it just, obviously I could go like tap, tap and get all the powder product on my face using this. It's super soft. I know some people like to use it for bronzer. I find that it applies too much bronzer to my face because of how big it is, but it could very easily be used for that. I do find myself using it to bring my bronzer down on my neck sometimes if I need to make the colors kind of mesh well between my chest and my face. Love, love that brush. Super soft. This one is probably the least soft of the ones that I'm going to talk about, but I love it no less. It's the Too Faced Mr. Right Perfect Powder Brush. The reason I like this is because I find that I can get the most precise application. So a lot of times when I'm using like more mattifying powders that I don't want to put over my entire face, I really want to concentrate them the most in my T-zone so that I don't just matte and flat out my entire face. I like to use this because it is smaller and I can be a little bit more precise with it. So I do love that for that. And then this one is just an option that I've had for a long time and I just find myself reaching for no particular reason other than I like it. And it is the, I'm talking fast, sorry. It Brushes for Ulta Velvet Luxe Plush Powder number 313 brush. So it looks like this. I will say that it was much softer. I'm not saying it's not soft. Let me rephrase that. It was much fluffier on the tester at the store. Once I got it home and washed it, I felt like it kind of made its own shape. And so it's not as fluffy, but again, it keeps that shape. So it's perfect to apply to the face for a more dense application. So if I want more powder on my face, if I've got a super luminous complexion and I want to powder it down a lot, I will use this. Or if I've got a super matte complexion and I want to use a glowy powder to really help boost up the glow, I will use this. So there is a reason for this, other than I just like it. Okay, bronzer brushes. My favorite bronzer brush of all time, hands down, period, no questions asked, can you tell I'm serious, is the Wayne Goss number 11 brush. I don't even know if this is technically for bronzer. I mean, I'm pretty sure you can use it for whatever you want. But for me and my face shape and my bronzer needs, it's absolutely phenomenal. And I just like to apply. I mean, really, if you've seen any of my tutorials, you've seen me use this. It is the best. It's so soft. But again, it is animal hair. So if you don't like that, I don't know if any of my other options are synthetic. Let me pull a synthetic option real quick. The Real Techniques blush brush is a great synthetic option for bronzer. But my other two personal favorites are the Bobbi Brown bronzer brush. I will say this is not the softest. It's a little bit scratchy. But if you like Bobbi Brown bronzers, I have not found a bronzer brush that works better with those bronzers. This one, hands down, works the best. I don't know why. They knew what they were doing. They wanted to keep it in the family. I don't know, but it works the best. Just the best. So I love that, and I can handle a little bit of shedding. It hasn't excessively shedded on me. I had it quite a while too. I can handle that and a little bit of scratchiness for the results that it gives me with those bronzers. And then finally, another very luxe, most expensive brush I'm going to talk about today, the Tom Ford number 5 bronzing brush. Absolutely not a necessity. Like, I am not telling anybody they need to go out and spend $115 or however much this was. I bought it because of how much I love brushes and because I'm a collector and because I wanted it. I mean, do I need another reason? It's my money. I wanted it. So that's why I bought it, but I do love it. I find that it blends as it applies flawlessly. So if you do want a little bit of a bigger application or wider, or you're not really contouring or wanting to change your shape, you just really truly want to warm up your face, this is the brush that I will use for that purpose because it's so big, so soft, so fluffy, and so luxe. Okay, blush. I only have two, one of which is really the one I reach for the most, and it is the It Cosmetics Soft Touch Blush Brush. This is the one that came, they have a lot of versions of blush brushes. This one came in a set that I will link down below because it also has my buffing brush that I always get asked about in the set as well. For these two brushes alone, that and my buffer, it is worth the price of the entire set. So, and because you can't get them separately, they sell similar ones, but I've tried the similar ones and they're not the same. So because you can't get them separately, I think the kit is worth these two brushes. But the blush, I always start my blush up here and just kind of bring it down to about halfway through my eye. And it just applies the perfect amount. The perfect amount. Love, love. Now, if I have a super pigmented blush and it's maybe a little bit darker than I probably should be using, so I just want a really sheer coverage, I will use the Smashbox Buildable Cheek Brush because it is so flimsy and non-dense. It really does put down such a sheer layer of product for whatever you're putting on, and so that's why I like this. For highlight, most of the time you will always find me using the Anastasia A23 highlighter brush. Hands down, the best for highlight. It's just the best. It works for every highlight you could ever possibly want to use, period. End of story. I've said that a lot because I'm really adamant about these choices. It just works the best. So that is what I use most of the time. However, some of my newer highlight choices that have made their way into my collection work best with this brush, and it is the Ray Morris Deluxe Kabuki brush number 1. So it looks like this. Obviously, highlight is not the only purpose for this, but I find it does apply a gorgeous highlight. And again, some of the ones that are a little more hard pressed in the pan and a little bit harder to pick up, I find work better with this brush. finally, this is gonna be a long video and a lot of links I need to do at the end. This is the buffing brush. This is the brush I get asked about more than any other product I ever use in any of my tutorials. I get asked about it even when I'm not using it on videos where I don't even mention it. People will ask about it in the comments. And it is the It Brushes for Ulta Blurring Powder Brush. It comes in the same set as this blush brush. So these are the two that I say are worth the set price to me. I have, you know, any duo fiber brush will work, and I say that all the time, but I find this is the perfect size and it's the perfect density, because I do find if you get one that's a little too loose in the density, it's not going to buff out the way I prefer it to, because I really want it to buff out those edges of the lines of my makeup. So this is perfect. It's not too dense where it's going to apply too much powder, but it just does the best job. It's the only one I use. We're going to talk about 2 more brushes. This is my last favorite in my personal collection, and then I'm going to tell you the one I love the most in my kit. This is my favorite touch-up brush, and it is the Wayne Goss Airbrush. I don't even know if you can get this anymore. I'm pretty sure you can. Maybe, maybe not. Hopefully he'll bring it back, because he has brought it back a second time. But if you have this, or if you hopefully snatch it if he ever brings it back, this is my favorite. I mean, you can use it for anything. But my favorite is to just apply a little bit of touch-up powder on the sides of my nose, on my chin, and in between my brows, which is where I can get a little bit too dewy for my liking sometimes. And it just works perfect because it doesn't apply too much to where you can start seeing makeup, especially for touch-up. You don't want to start applying too much makeup on top of makeup, because that you can get cakey real easy. And this just lays down the most perfect amount. It's so soft. It's so glorious. I love it. Now finally, if you have made it to the end, I'm going to tell you my absolute favorite brush that I have ever used on clients. It is the most versatile brush I have ever used on myself or clients, period. I have about 10 of them in my kit because I have different sets for every client so that I don't have to spend a lot of time cleaning brushes in between. And I have to have at least 1 to 2 to use on everyone. This is the Real Techniques setting brush. Hands down, again, the most versatile brush that I use. I will use it for all of these purposes. Foundation, concealer, setting the under eyes, setting the face, highlight, contour, blush. I mean, I could probably go on and on and on. I use it for everything. I basically can use it for everything but bronzer application, because I need a little bit of a bigger brush. It's synthetic. It's the perfect size. It's priced right. I'm going to link all these below, but if you don't get any of these brushes, please get this, because I promise you, you will find 1,800 different ways to use it. It's so good. I'm done. I am done talking about my favorite brushes of all time. I can only pray that these clips don't get corrupted. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. I will, like I said, do my best to link every single brush I talked about down in the description box so that you can find them easily. Hopefully you found some new brushes to try out. And I think, because I always tend to ask y'all a question at the end of every video, if you have made it this far, tell me what your favorite brush of all time is, because if I had to choose, I would probably say this because of the versatility. I want to know your favorite brush of all time, because A, I'm nosy, and B, I might want to buy it. So let me know down in the comment section below. As always, thank y'all so much for watching. Be sure and like and subscribe before you leave so you don't miss out on any future content. And I hope you all go out and have a very blessed day.